There are moments in life when everything quietly falls apart. Not with noise, but with a heavy silence you can't escape. You do all the right things, try harder, hold tighter, and still, the storm doesn't stop. That's when exhaustion creeps in. Not from failure, but from fighting what cannot be controlled. This is a story about those moments, about a man who believed strength meant resistance, and learned slowly and painfully that real strength sometimes means letting go. If you've ever felt tired of battling every season of life, this story will meet you there. In a small town where the rain often lingered longer than expected, there lived a man who thought endurance was the same as courage. The town was quiet in a way that felt practiced, as if it had learned to hold its breath. Mornings arrived gently there, soft light on empty roads, shop shutters rising without urgency, the smell of wet earth lingering from the night before. This was where Elias lived, a man who believed deeply in structure. He woke before the sun, folded his sheets tight, drank his coffee without sugar, and walked the same path every day, as if repetition itself were a promise. To the outside world, Elias looked steady, reliable, someone who knew where he was going. Discipline had become his language of safety. If he kept moving, if he stayed useful, if he earned his rest, nothing could truly touch him, or so he believed. But inside, there was a quiet tension he rarely acknowledged, a restlessness that surfaced only in still moments, when the streetlights flickered on, or when the rain tapped too gently against the window. Stillness made him uneasy. Silence asked questions he wasn't ready to answer. He wanted a life that made sense, one where effort always led to outcome, where pain could be avoided through preparation. His purpose, as he understood it, was simple: build something solid enough that it could never be taken away. Yet storms have a way of announcing themselves slowly. It began with small disruptions, plans delayed, expectations unmet, a feeling that his careful routine no longer brought the same peace. He ignored these signs, tightening his grip instead. More discipline, less rest, stronger walls. You might recognize this moment, that phase when you double down, believing courage means endurance alone, when you confuse control with strength, when you sense the sky changing but convince yourself you can outwork the weather. Elias stood firmly in that belief, unaware that the first lesson of his journey was already unfolding. The storm was not coming to test his strength. It was coming to change how he understood it. Elias believed progress was something you could measure. Hours logged, goals met, boxes checked. Each small victory became proof that discipline worked, that if he stayed focused long enough, life would eventually reward him with certainty. So, he worked harder. Days blurred into routines polished to perfection. He arrived early, left late, and filled the space in between with effort. Compliments came quietly, nods of approval, passing remarks about his reliability. They settled into him like warm stones, grounding him. For the first time in a long while, he felt close to something resembling peace. Success to Elias wasn't loud. It looked like stability, predictability, a sense that he was finally ahead of life instead of chasing it. He told himself this was purpose, that building something durable was the same as building something meaningful. And for a while it worked. The chaos he once feared stayed at a distance. Problems were solved before they grew. Emotions were postponed, neatly folded away like unused letters. Discipline became his shelter, his armor against uncertainty. When others complained about exhaustion or doubt, Elias stayed silent. He had no time for weakness. There was always another task, another plan, another way to stay in control. But shelters built too quickly often hide fragile foundations. What he didn't notice, what no one warned him about, was how tightly his sense of worth had wrapped itself around results. How rest began to feel undeserved. How slowing down felt dangerous. He wasn't just working towards something anymore. He was running from the fear that without momentum, everything might collapse. You may know this phase well, the one where motivation feels clean and purposeful, where healing seems unnecessary because productivity numbs the pain, where strength looks like constant forward motion. Elias stood tall in that season, convinced he had finally outrun the storm. He didn't realize yet that he wasn't building shelter from the wind. He was building his life in its path. The storm arrived on a day that looked ordinary. No warning. No dramatic shift in the sky. Just a quiet moment when everything Elias had leaned on gave way at once. A decision made without him. A door closed where he believed there was permanence. What he had built with years of discipline unraveled in a single conversation, spoken in a calm tone that made it hurt even more. At first he didn't react. He nodded. He listened. He thanked them for their honesty. Strength, he thought, was staying composed. But when he stepped outside, the air felt heavier. The familiar road looked unfamiliar. His breath shortened, not from panic, but from disbelief. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. He had followed the rules. He had stayed disciplined. He had earned continuity. The loss wasn't just professional or practical, it was personal. His identity had been stitched into that structure so tightly that when it collapsed, it took pieces of him with it. Purpose drained out, leaving confusion in its place. The shelter he trusted was gone, and for the first time, there was nowhere to stand. That night, sleep avoided him. Thoughts repeated themselves in endless circles. What could I have done differently? Where did I miscalculate? If I fix it fast enough, maybe none of this will count as failure, but storms don't negotiate. By morning, reality had settled in. The routine that once gave him strength now felt hollow. His discipline had nowhere to land. Effort without direction became weight instead of momentum. You've likely stood in this storm before. The one that doesn't care how prepared you were, the one that exposes how fragile certainty can be, the one that makes you question whether strength was ever about control at all. Elias didn't know it yet, but this collapse was not the end of his journey. It was the moment the story stopped being about success and began being about truth. Elias told himself it was temporary. That belief became his anchor. He woke each morning expecting reversal, convinced that if he replayed events carefully enough, he'd find the moment where everything could still be fixed. His mind clung to the past like a lifeline. Every conversation, every decision, every missed signal dissected again and again. He stayed close to what remained. Old emails, old routines, old paths walked out of habit rather than hope. Letting go felt like admitting defeat, and defeat felt like erasing the years he had given. So he held on, even as the ruins cut into his hands. Guilt followed him everywhere. Not loud, not dramatic, just constant. A quiet voice whispering that he should have seen it coming. That discipline should have been enough. That real strength wouldn't have allowed this to happen. Time slowed in this phase. Days passed, but nothing moved. He wasn't healing and he wasn't rebuilding. He was suspended between what was gone and what he refused to imagine. Progress felt disloyal to the version of himself who had worked so hard. You may recognize this space, the place where memory becomes a trap, where motivation turns inward and feeds regret instead of growth, where holding on feels safer than stepping forward, even when standing still hurts. Elias avoided people now. Questions made him defensive. Advice felt insulting. He didn't want solutions. He wanted restoration. He wanted the past to return, unchanged. But storms don't leave things the way they were. The more he resisted acceptance, the heavier everything became. Exhaustion replaced effort. Nights grew longer. Hope thinned into obligation. And beneath it all, an unspoken truth waited patiently. He wasn't protecting his past. He was imprisoning himself inside it. Eventually, even resistance grows tired. Elias stopped arguing with his thoughts because there was nothing left to defend. The questions had exhausted themselves. The anger dulled into something heavier, an emptiness that didn't demand answers. It simply existed. Days became quiet. Not peaceful, just still. He let calls go unanswered. Meals were simple, often forgotten. The clock moved, but time no longer felt like something he belonged to. It passed around him, indifferent. This was the lowest point. Not because something painful happened, but because nothing did. No distractions, no urgency, no role to perform. Without the structure he once relied on, he didn't know how to measure his worth. Discipline, once his strength, now felt useless without direction. He sat with the version of himself he had avoided for years, the one without achievements to lean on. There is a strange honesty in this kind of silence. It strips life down to its bones. No future plans to chase, no past victories to protect. Just breath, just awareness, just the weight of being present with everything you didn't want to feel. Elias noticed how tired he truly was, not physically, but emotionally. Tired of fighting reality, tired of proving something, tired of holding himself together with clenched fists. You may know this moment too, the one where motivation disappears, where even hope feels like too much effort, where failure isn't dramatic, it's quiet and internal. But something subtle happens here, if you allow it. When the noise finally fades, when the storm has passed and you stop searching the sky for answers, a small space opens. Not for solutions, but for truth. Elias didn't realize it then, but this emptiness wasn't punishment. It was the pause before change becomes possible. Elias began walking again, not with purpose, but because staying still had started to feel heavier than moving. His feet carried him beyond familiar streets, past the edges of town where things were less defined. The road narrowed. The noise thinned. Fields stretched open, unguarded. It was there he noticed the old man. He sat on a low wooden bench beside a weathered fence, feeding birds with slow, careful movements. Nothing about him demanded attention, no urgency, no expression of importance, just presence. Elias would have passed by if not for the calm. It was unfamiliar, almost unsettling. He stopped without knowing why. They didn't speak at first. The birds landed freely, unafraid. After a while, Elias asked the question that had been sitting in him for weeks, disguised as small talk. "Doesn't the weather bother you?" he asked, nodding toward the shifting sky. The old man smiled, not amused, just understanding. "Only when I pretend I can control it," he said. That was all. No advice, no lecture. He scattered the remaining feed and stood slowly, as if time worked differently around him. Before leaving, he turned back once. "Most storms pass on their own," he added. "The ones that hurt the most are the ones we fight." Elias stood there long after the bench was empty. The words settled gently, without force. For the first time since everything collapsed, he didn't feel the need to respond, to defend himself, to analyze, to fix. He felt something else instead. Relief. Not because the pain was gone, but because the struggle against it softened. He realized then that his exhaustion hadn't come from loss alone. It had come from resistance. You may encounter wisdom like this in your own life, not through grand moments, but through quiet ones. A sentence, a glance, a pause that changes how you carry your pain. Elias turned back toward town, not renewed, not healed, but open. And that was enough to begin again. Elias didn't wake up transformed. There was no sudden clarity, no dramatic shift in his life. What changed was smaller and quieter. He stopped arguing with the day before it even began. He let mornings unfold without forcing them into shape. Coffee tasted warmer when he drank it slowly. Walks became less about distance and more about noticing where he was. For the first time in a long while, he allowed space between moments. And in that space, his breath returned. Acceptance, he learned, wasn't surrender. It was release. He began practicing a different kind of discipline. Not the rigid kind that demanded results, but the gentle kind that asked for honesty. When sadness surfaced, he didn't rush to bury it. When fear appeared, he named it without shame. Strength no longer meant carrying everything alone. Small rituals replaced old routines. He cleaned not to stay busy, but to care for the space he lived in. He rested without needing to justify it. He spoke less, listened more. Each action felt humble, almost invisible, but together they stitched something new inside him. Healing did not arrive as motivation. It arrived as permission. Permission to stop performing. Permission to be unfinished. Permission to exist without proving worth through struggle. You may recognize this phase if you've ever chosen peace over pride, if you've ever softened after years of tension. Growth here isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It simply stays. Elias still thought about what he'd lost, but the thoughts no longer demanded punishment. They passed through him like weather, noticed, respected, and allowed to move on. For the first time, he understood something essential. Armor is useful in battle, but it's heavy to live in. So, he learned to walk without it. Healing has a way of being tested when you least expect it. Just as Elias began to trust the quiet stability he'd built, familiar winds returned, invitations resurfaced, old opportunities whispered promises of restoration. The version of himself he once was knocked gently, then persistently, reminding him how efficient control used to feel. The temptation wasn't obvious. It arrived dressed as progress. He felt it in his body first, a tightening, a rush of urgency. The old rhythm tried to reclaim him. Do more, move faster, prove again. Discipline, once softened, threatened to harden back into armor. This was the new struggle. There were days Elias slipped. He overcommitted. He stayed up late planning outcomes that didn't yet exist. He caught himself measuring worth in productivity again, judging peace as laziness. But something was different now. He noticed. Instead of collapsing into guilt, he paused. Instead of pushing through exhaustion, he rested. Consistency replaced intensity. He returned to the practices that grounded him, not perfectly, but patiently. Growth, he learned, isn't about never falling back. It's about how quickly and kindly you return to yourself. You may be in this season right now, where you know better but the old ways still call, where courage looks less like ambition and more like restraint, where discipline isn't force, it's devotion to what keeps you whole. Each time Elias chose presence over pressure, the pull weakened. The storm still existed, but it no longer controlled his direction. Strength was no longer something he proved in extremes. It was something he practiced daily, in small, quiet decisions that no one applauded. And that was enough. One morning, Elias noticed the sky, not because it was particularly clear or dramatic, but because it no longer felt heavy. The air carried the same uncertainty it always had, yet something inside him had shifted. He wasn't scanning the horizon for threats. He wasn't bracing for impact. He simply stood there, present. Life hadn't returned to what it was. It had become something else entirely, quieter, slower, deeper. Purpose no longer came from chasing a future version of himself. It emerged naturally from how he showed up to each moment. He worked again, but without urgency. Rested without guilt. Connected without armor. Failure no longer defined him. It informed him. Pain still visited, but it didn't stay. This was his transformation, not the kind that announces itself, but the kind that settles into the bones. Elias understood now that peace isn't the absence of storms. It's the absence of resistance. The sky changes, seasons shift. Control was never the goal. Adaptation was. You may reach this place one day, or maybe you're already closer than you think, where motivation feels gentle, where strength feels spacious, where rebirth doesn't mean becoming someone new, but returning to who you were before the world taught you to fight everything. Elias walked through the town that once felt confining, and it felt open now. Not because the world had changed, but because he had. The storm that once broke him had given something back, perspective. And under this new sky, he finally understood. Nothing needed to be conquered for life to be meaningful. If you're listening to this story, it's likely because you've faced a storm of your own, not the kind you can outrun or overpower, but the kind that lingers, asking something of you. Loss, failure, change, the moments that break routines and expose what you've been using to feel strong. Elias's journey was never about becoming invincible. It was about becoming honest. The storm didn't arrive to punish him. It arrived to teach him that discipline without compassion becomes a cage. That courage isn't always loud resistance, it's quiet acceptance. That letting go is not weakness, but wisdom. Healing begins when you stop fighting what already is. You don't have to hold on to every version of yourself. Some chapters end so others can begin. Some failures are not meant to be fixed, only understood. And some storms are simply clearing the sky. Strength grows when you allow yourself to feel. Peace arrives when you stop measuring your worth by outcomes. Purpose emerges not from control, but from presence. You may still stumble. Old winds may return. That doesn't mean you've failed, it means you're human. Rebirth is not a single moment, it's a practice. So when life feels heavy, ask yourself gently, am I fighting the storm or learning from it? Because the truth is this, you were never meant to conquer every season, only to grow through them. If this story resonated with you, carry it forward. Share it with someone who needs rest, not resistance. And if you'd like more stories like this, slow, human, and honest, stay connected. The storm will pass, and when it does, you will still be here,